So I was telling you, I'm going to be over there in a couple weeks. If I get blackout drunk and I have to go to a hospital, am I covered?
I mean, let me put it this way. You won't be friends with the nurses who might treat you, but yeah, you would get covered. Yeah, you would
See,
get
okay.
Wow.
Okay, then I do continue to look on the NHS with envy. Welcome to Millennial, the home of pretend adulting and real talk. I'm Andrew.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Pamela.
And my partner, Pat, was walking our dog, Finn, through the neighborhood the other night, and Pat texts me, I think the new neighbors are gay. And I sent him that, shocked face emoji, like my face is vibrating. Because we don't have many gay people in the neighborhood. There's a couple, but they're not really our generation, let's say.
They're old. They're elder gays.
You said it, not me. And yeah, so we've just been like... But these new neighbors, they're 5 houses down. So they're also on the same road, pretty close by. And so once Pat presented this guest to me, HOA Dad, me, kicks into action. I look up the property records, and within 5 minutes, I'm watching their wedding video on YouTube. I already know way too much about these two.
Oh, no.
And now, we want to make an intro, say hi. We gays have to stick together. But they're 5 houses down. What do? I don't go 5 houses down to introduce myself. That's weird. If they were next door, it'd be one thing.
I think you gotta utilize the tools you have, which is 2 adorable dogs, and just conveniently walk by at different hours.
Yep.
Okay.
Wear your Kenneth hat and walk with Pat. You and Pat walk together with
Hand in
Brooklyn
hand.
and Finn.
Yes.
Yep.
Giving each other little kisses. We're just parked in front of their house. Oh, I just love you so much.
It's look at us, we're gay too.
You bring a neon sign.
Right.
Oh, funny to see
you
gays here too.
Pride Month is coming up, so maybe you just conveniently walk by on the way to the Pride Parade.
Yeah. Hey, we host drag race watch parties, and Andrew put on press-on nails for the first time in his life a couple of weeks ago for the finale.
You might have to get a flag. It's
They do have a big black truck, though. I don't know how gay they are.
They might just be more mask. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or like Southern gays, maybe.
Hey,
I
guys.
assume Deep South, everybody has a truck, maybe.
One of them is
maybe
military.
They're maybe they're in construction or landscaping.
One of them's military. I learned that in their wedding video. Beautiful vows, by the way, too.
I love how you already know so much about these people you haven't met yet.
And you know what's going to be funny about that? When you inevitably do meet them and strike up a conversation with them, you are going to ask all of the basic getting to know you questions as though you don't already know the answers.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And you're going to be nodding and playing along and acting like you've never heard any of this stuff before.
It's going to be a masterclass in acting.
Yes. Okay. But I have a follow-up question. So you said they're 5 houses down. How far away is 5 houses really? Is it at the top of your neighborhood? Is it further down? Would you have to feasibly drive by their house to leave the neighborhood?
It'd be funny if I pick up my laptop right now and I walk you guys down the street.
Yeah. I'm just wondering because I feel like if you have to drive by at any point,
no, these homes are close together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just feel like maybe it's not that far and you could just cut all the bullshit and just go over there and be like, hey, we noticed you all moved in. And we just wanted to come and introduce ourselves because that's still 5 houses is still part of your neighborhood. It's not like you saw them two rows down.
Yeah. I do like this idea of walking by enough times and they see us in short shorts because summer's coming. I just bought some 5.5-inch inseam shorts.
Ooh, show a little thigh.
Show some thigh. Yeah. My rainbow flag will fall out of my
out
pocket
for the
or
gays.
something. Thighs out for the gays. Yeah, so I think we just need to subtly drop the hints and then maybe find an opportunity to speak.
Very subtle when you're showing some thigh, maybe a little cheek, and just casually dropping pride flags as you walk by.
How short do you think 5 inches is? It's not very short.
And my ass could hang out of those. I put them on a couple days ago.
I think it depends on the ass.
That's true. Maybe Andrew's really packing some ass and we just didn't know.
I eat a lot of peanut butter and it all goes to my booty, I think. Those are short shorts. I'm like, wow, I don't know if I could do this. But during the summer, they're going to be
say
amazing.
that, and then the average inseam for women is like 2 inches,
Yeah, we always see that, Bodette.
3 inches.
Yeah.
No pockets for you is basically what they say.
If there is an update, I will let everybody know. But I do have to say that by bringing this up on the show today, they can never find out about this podcast because they can't know.
What if they already listen?
I would leave the show. I would leave the show.
You would leave the show?
The embarrassment is terrible. My next door neighbors already follow the show on TikTok, and I don't need them knowing what's going on this show.
Okay. We will not cut this clip so that they can't sell you.
Yeah, well, we at least won't social this, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, do not. No, it's I don't know. This is the cross we bear here.
That's true. Good luck making friends. I really hope it works out for you.
I think it'd be cute to have some gay neighbors. You know,
I'm rooting for you. I'm please follow up and let us know how you finally make the introduction.
Yeah, I will. Well, listeners, we have a great interview today coming up, and we're also going to celebrate the first 100 days of the Trump administration. But first, this show is brought to you by listeners like you. Thank you to recent patrons who have joined us, including Catherine and Roxanne. No thank you to my new gay neighbors who I genuinely hope never hear this. But for the rest of you, visit patreon.com/millennial to support us for as little as $5 a month. And you can get instant access to perks like After Dark. It's where we reveal just how much we despised people we used to work with over the years. You can also get access to ad-free episodes, our live streams, and a lot more. And when you become a pal on our Patreon, you'll be able to listen to all of our bonus audio content right within your favorite podcast app. In After Dark this week, Mugglesuck will return, and we'll be checking in on our old boss, whose father once said in front of boss's wife that she was inferior to her husband. To a reporter, and it got printed. And we're also going to discuss how this boss saved us from COVID. It's just going to be a that type of gossipy Mugglesuck today.
Can't wait for that revelation.
It'll be news to me. Well, you can visit patreon.com/millennial and get started today with a 7-day free trial to check out all of our bonus content, including After Dark. And annual subscription discounts are also available if you choose to stay on after your free trial.
There are also other ways to support us. You can head on over to shop.millennialshow.com. That's where you can pick up official show gear like the canceling since 2015, shirts, the For the Show shirts and hoodies. Everything is super comfortable. And as someone who is practically a vampire and likes to keep their house very cold in the summer, I have found myself wearing my hoodie a lot recently. The only reason I'm not wearing it now is because it's laundry day, so didn't have it available. But Andrew, I see you rocking the Greetings from 2020 shirt.
Yeah, from our Overstock store, and it has a trans pride flag on it, actually. So I need to wear this in front of my neighbor's house to let them know.
There you go.
That's true.
There you go.
And to let them know that you masked in 2020.
We what in 2020?
You masked up.
Oh, oh yeah.
Yeah.
We're safety queens. We care about our health here.
Masked, vaxxed, waxed, all of it. But anyway, you can also help us out by telling a fellow millennial about the show and make sure that you are following us in your favorite podcast app. All right, y'all. We are at day 99. Unfortunately, we know the timer doesn't stop at 100. We're stuck with this for pretty much almost another 4 years. But as we hit day 100, Trump's approval rating is at a record low, even for him. And he's not having a good day.
There was reporting that got coverage on Fox News over the weekend that Trump's approval rating is at a record low. And of course, Trump, as he always does, was watching Fox News, and he got really angry at Rupert Murdoch for sharing this information. And Trump is also now talking about investigating pollsters because he can't believe his approval rating is at a record low. And of course, it's very embarrassing for him.
Yeah. So since we were starting with his approval rating at 100 days, I thought that we could just talk through some other numbers to commemorate the first 100 days. So first of all, just want to point out that Sleepy Joe had a 53% approval rating coming off his first 100 days and COVID. By the way.
Oh.
So just want to throw that out there. Did it last? No. But I also think it's kind of poetic that Trump is number 47 and he has yet to break a 47% approval rating. Will he? Won't he? Who knows? You'll have to tune in next time on The Celebrity President to find out.
The celebrity president.
I mean, that's what he is. He's had 214 executive actions in the first 100 days. No president other than Roosevelt signed more executive orders. And those rates are yearly, right? Like typically if you look up how, like on average, how many executive actions did President Roosevelt take per year, you get the number. This guy has already done 214 in the first 100 days.
And I'm assuming that this is during the Great Depression in an effort to revitalize the country and the economy, right? Yeah. So the opposite is happening here. Right. It's like some New Deal type shit, not some ridiculous power trip situation.
Yeah. I mean, we might need a New Deal by the time they're done with us. But we shall see how that all goes. Something else I wanted to call out is that in the first 100 days, only 5 bills signed into law. Just to compare that against his first term, he signed 28 laws in his first 100 days. Biden, in his one and only term, signed 11, which included the American Recovery Act, the big COVID infrastructure investment post-pandemic, which was a really big one. When you think about what's been signed so far, it's the Lake and Riley Act, like 3 continuing resolutions and the funding bill. And that's been it. So this is just really to highlight that this man wants to rule like a king. He doesn't want to have to collaborate with the other branches of government because he doesn't know how. It's like little bitch behavior, to be honest with you. And speaking of, Trump has also overturned over 100 Biden executive orders. Biden only signed 162 total during his term. Yeah. And when you look at what Biden overturned from Trump, it was like double digits. And it was like pretty heinous shit that he overturned. But Trump just came in and was like, no, don't want any of this. The administration has also faced 200 lawsuits, mostly because of these executive actions. And a lot of them are held up in the courts right now. There were over 1,500 pardons, mostly January 6th insurrectionists. So good to know that those folks are out in the world again. Around 75,000 federal workers fired, and just as like a bonus number to throw in here, 1 dead pope because of JD Vance.
This sounds like the 12 Days of Christmas song kind of right
and
now.
A partridge in a pear tree. 1
dead pope, 200 lawsuits, 5 bills signed into law.
So yeah, it's been 100 days.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say it's been,
wow.
Can't say it's been great.
And yet it feels like 100 years.
Yeah.
Titanic 84 years meme for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a good look, Laura, at just what's gone on over these last 100 days, broadly.
Last 500 days. And this is only scratching the surface. This is like the edition that you listen to if you fast forwarded through every other time we've done this over the last 100 days. Like, if you want to listen to the last one to get the high level TLDR, here you go. It's way worse, though.
Yeah. In terms of how Trump's decisions are impacting everyday Americans and this country, I just wanted to share something that's happening in my corner of the world. Las Vegas has a lot of new home construction going on, and there are fears of ICE raiding home construction sites, which is causing construction to pause. I want to quote the Las Vegas Locally social media account. Residential construction in Vegas could soon come to a screeching halt. ICE agents have been arresting workers at job sites, and now many are too afraid to show up. Contractors are worried they won't have enough manpower to finish projects, according to multiple sources. Now, I wanted to share this because anecdotally, my friend actually lives in a new development with homes still being built, and he has noticed some areas of his neighborhood have just completely halted construction over the last week or so. And he thought it might be tariff related, have to import all of these construction materials and whatnot. But maybe it's concerns about ICE agents, or maybe it's both.
You know what's so interesting is that there's a hotel that's being built fairly close to me. And I've also noticed that they've stopped construction. And I just assumed that maybe they ran out of funding for the project because it seems like they were trying to build pretty fast. I didn't make the connection that it was possibly due to fear of an uptick in ICE raids because I don't know. Because is Las Vegas considered a sanctuary city? I feel like the Bay Area is considered a sanctuary area. So it's different.
I think the governor of Nevada did say that he wasn't going to participate in these Trump raids.
Got it. Yeah. So I never made that correlation, but this is a really good anecdote to point out for sure. Because I'm sure that a lot of people in industries where you normally see immigrants working are seeing an influx of people not showing up if they are keeping track of raids and raids are happening close by, or if there are news stories coming out like this.
On a somewhat related note, there was a report in the New York Times today that retailers are fearing toy shortages at Christmas because tariffs are freezing the supply chain. So some of these decisions that he's making, in our day-to-day lives, the stock market might be tanking, and that's terrible to see if you have money in the stock market. But a lot of these decisions aren't going to actually show their impacts for weeks or months still.
Yeah. And I mean, the impacts are already horrible. We have 2-year-olds and 4-year-olds with cancer who are citizens being deported.
Yeah.
That's been news just in the last couple of days. It's horrendous that anyone would be treated that way. But now your citizenship doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's something scary for the White House, right? And maybe we can end our 100 days talk this week on a bit of a lighter note.
The White House got in a little riff with Amazon because there was a report this week that Amazon is considering showing the costs of tariffs on the checkout pages, which actually Temu is already doing. They just added this recently. They have like an import fee line item now when you check out. It's like
That's
$80.
really smart.
Yeah.
I kind of want everyone to do this.
Oh, I know.
They should, honestly.
Mm-hmm. It's like, here's what you're paying and it's not our fault.
So Punchbowl News reported that Amazon was considering this too. Trump administration catches wind of this, and then the White House press secretary stepped in and she said, this is a hostile and political act by Amazon. And then Amazon, of course, Bezos, who made a major donation to Trump's inauguration campaign, he was like, oh no, this isn't happening. This isn't happening.
Grow a fucking backbone, Bezos. Honestly, they should do it.
Right.
Because I've noticed some, like, you can always tell, especially if it's like a garment you're looking like. I'm going to Seattle in a few days, and Seattle notoriously rainy this time of year. So I was like, let me just like find a cheap windbreaker rain jacket. That shit's marked up at least double. And I know it's because they're being imported from China or from somewhere else, which very common for Amazon clothing specifically to come from those places. But I don't know how many people realize that the reason why this like flimsy piece of clothing is so marked up is because of the tariffs. So I'm all for this.
It seems like Amazon is stuck here because if they don't post a little line item on the checkout page, like here's how tariffs are impacting the price all of a sudden, then consumers are going to be like, wait, why did this get so expensive? And then they're going to get mad at Amazon. But Amazon's trying to be like, don't blame us. This wasn't our fault.
It almost kind of feels like they have to, because like if you're somebody that keeps items in your cart for later too, you'll get those alerts that say prices are fluctuating.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen when that person sees that something has like doubled in price or gone up by a sizable amount? That's not just a few cents or a few dollars.
Yeah, and as soon as the end of this week, we might start seeing these price increases online for products from China. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah. I think the first major round of pricing FAFO is coming. Like, I think there's been a lot of it over the last few weeks with just like the volatility.
Let me translate for the audience. You said FAFO.
Yes.
That means fuck around and find out, right?
Yep.
But
And unfortunately, we all have to FAFO.
Right. But the eggs, Laura. But the egg prices.
I know. Clearly, eggs should have been my number one issue area in the last election.
Exactly.
What was I thinking?
Well, this is our last formal first 100 days segment, but we'll still, of course, be paying attention to what's going on and talking about things from time to time. And listeners, pals, keep your stories and how you're being impacted coming in. We've been sharing those stories over the last 100 days, and we have really appreciated hearing from you. So yeah, keep all the feedback coming. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll be joined by one of our listeners to talk about fitness and nutrition. We'll be right back.
All right. So we have a special guest joining us this week on the show. A little bit of a backstory here. A couple of weeks ago, we actually did a segment on Millennial where we were talking about how we personally stay fit and active. And we got this great message from one of our listeners, Jeremy, on Instagram. And we loved it so much that we decided to invite him on the show. So Jeremy has a BSc in sports science and MSc in sports nutrition and is super passionate about debunking fitness and nutrition myths. So this just felt like the perfect segue into bringing that conversation back and giving you guys a little bit more information about that, because we know that quite a few of you enjoyed that discussion as well. So with that, we'd like to welcome Jeremy to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're so welcome. And it's an honor to be here, honestly.
Aw, thanks.
You're so sweet.
Well, we were saying to Jeremy before we started recording, like, if you reach out, we will invite you on. So be careful.
Right.
We might invite you on, I guess I should
That's
say.
probably
There's a
why
real
people
chance.
don't reach out, because they're scared.
Yeah, I
It
was a
sounds
little
like
surprised.
a threat. Like, we will invite you.
Yeah.
Well, Jeremy, can you tell our listeners a little bit more about your background and what all that means and how you got into the world of fitness?
Yeah, sure. I mean, to be honest with you, you did a good job of just explaining some of it. But yeah, I mean, look, I come from a reasonably sporty family, I suppose. And that's kind of underpinned and I suppose and fed my interest from quite a young age. I've never been kind of a professional sports person or anything like that. I just happen to have developed an interest over time. I have a vivid memory of when I was about 14 years old, kind of getting into sports at school and then not wanting to do field hockey in England, which is not ice hockey, but it's kind of hockey that you play on grass and things like that. And I just didn't really want to play that. It wasn't that much of an interest. And so the teacher said, you've got to do something else. You can't just sit around. And so I thought, okay, what else is there? And there was basketball, and I'm not that tall, and it wasn't something I was interested in. So I decided to go to the gym because there was a local gym nearby, and I thought, okay, fine. And I picked up the weights. I don't know what happened. A fairy maybe sort of waved a wand or something, but honestly, I fell in love with it from that point. And ever since then, I've kind of been doing some form of exercise, I suppose, throughout my life, whether it's running or whatever, really lifting weights. But yeah, that fed my interest, and that's how I got into sort of doing an undergraduate degree and then a master's. And I did actually end up going on a PhD, funnily enough, after that. But I quit after about 6 months. Yeah, it wasn't really for me. We were looking at kind of how you can use certain types of fiber to feed the gut bacteria and how it might help people lose weight. But yeah, I was stuck in a lab and it just wasn't really my thing. So I quit, which took a big decision. It was a big decision in my life, but yeah, and then since then I've now moved into the NHS. So
that's kind of a good life lesson, right? It's like things can work out. It's scary to take that leap, but things can work out for the best.
Yeah, totally.
What do you think it was about when you picked up the weights? Like, what did you love about it so much? Because it seems like that just ignited a spark in you.
Yeah, to be honest with you, Andrew, I don't even know to this day. I'd like an answer to that. It's probably some sort of biochemical thing that's happened in my brain, and it ticked a lot of boxes. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think I'm someone who's a little more introverted, and I kind of like my own space, and I like doing things the way I like doing them.
Yeah.
And I think the gym kind of was the first time where it gave me that space to sort of explore that. I think, you go to school and everything's dictated for you, and I think in a sense it was quite nice to have that from that side of things. The gym isn't that for everyone, I will say that, but it was.
Yeah.
So you just self-taught yourself how to weight train and stuff? Okay, that's interesting. Because in freshman year of high school, so that would be our first year for us, we had to take weight training as part of PE. And that's the only reason I know how to do any of that in the gym. But if I was starting from zero right now, trying to go into like the weights, I probably wouldn't do it because I would be so scared to like ask somebody for help. I'm kind of like you. I want to go in. I want to do my own thing. I don't want to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
So
that's fascinating though, because in the in the UK, obviously some schools have access to gyms, some don't. But from when I hear that, I think that's great that you actually were taught that, and it gave you the confidence to be able to go in now and go and sort of structure your own sessions and that sort of thing. Because a lot of people, I think I've been around the world, but also especially, I know in England and stuff, they just don't have access to these sorts of things. And I think confidence is a big barrier for people to then maybe just starting or finding out what they want to do and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned working for the National Health Institute. Can you tell us a little more about what you do for them?
Yeah, the NHS in England is basically, most people have probably heard of it, but if they haven't, it's effectively the healthcare system in the UK or for UK residents. What I do personally, I work in mental health specifically. So I'm actually a performance analyst. So really what that means is I'm a problem solver, if you like. Okay. So I go in and I try and find things where they may need to improve and that sort of thing, really. So it's kind of a very varied job and it's fun. But from a mental health perspective, we have inpatient care, and which is kind of more emergency stuff, and then you've got community mental health, which kind of provides anything from, you're talking about ADHD and autism assessments, all the way down to sort of some kind of light touch interventions for anxiety and that sort of thing for all ages, older adults and kids. So that's the kind of portfolio of work that I tend to look after.
Okay. And I feel like us Americans, we look at the NHS and we're kind of envious of your system. Are there genuine good perks with the NHS? Is it as good as we think it might be over here?
Well, you're asking someone who's probably a little biased, but
that's true.
But I mean, look, the thing is, it's free at the point of entry. Which what I mean by that is, like, we pay taxes which fund the NHS, right? So you do sort of pay for it. It's just you don't really see it too much, but and you don't have to kind of fight with insurers. Do you cover this and all that sort of thing? But that's probably that's probably the biggest perk, I would say. And I think it's the accessibility of it. So, if whatever your income, whether you have a job or not, you will be covered. And I think the key thing is especially it's emergency care that is particularly good and it's covered. And I think that's probably one of the major benefits, I would say, of the NHS.
Okay. So I was telling you, I'm going to be over there in a couple of weeks. If I get blackout drunk and I have to go to a hospital, am I covered? Do I have to pay?
I mean, let me put it this way. You won't be friends with the nurses who might treat you, but you would get covered. Yeah, you would.
See,
get
okay.
Wow.
Okay, then I do continue to look on the NHS with envy. So what are some of the downsides then?
Yeah, I mean, I think downsides, I mean, this is probably universal, this downside, but is waiting times. I think for a lot of different care, there are long waiting lists. I mean, in my particular portfolio, I know that autism and ADHD assessments, for example, some kids can be waiting up to 5 years to get an assessment. They can go private, but obviously there's a cost to that. And most of the reason that kids especially want to get kind of an assessment on the NHS, for example, is that you can get medication subsidized. And a lot of ADHD medication is kind of lifelong. So when you think about the sort of cost saving and ability to kind of fund that yourself, it's just it makes a bit of a kind of obvious decision, but to wait. But obviously for emergency care, you can still have long waits too at times. I mean, there have been cases where people have needed an ambulance, they've had a heart attack, and they've then had to sort of be triaged in an ambulance because there aren't any beds, and then they might have to wait a long time. I think, and these sorts of things do happen in pockets, and I suppose they can happen all across the world and at different times and that sort of thing. I think probably the other downside I would focus on is the kind of postcode, what I would call postcode lottery. So you have things like, I mean, IVF is a good example, where some areas or regions fund it, some don't. Some fund it and they only fund it up to a certain age. Some fund it for one round. Some fund it for 3 full rounds, and up to 42 years of age. So there's a lot of kind of discrepancy around that. And then I think another good example is where basically when you pay for drugs, it's kind of subsidized. So what you pay is a prescription charge, which is like £11 for most medication. If you kind of, diagnosed with something like cancer, you get that for free. You don't have to pay any prescription charges. You get it for free and it covers your cost of cancer treatment. But then there are cases where people are born with genetic conditions like sickle cell anemia, for example. And obviously that affects the majority of kind of Black population in the UK. And basically they don't get any free, they have to pay for their prescriptions. And I think obviously it's still subsidized, so it's somewhat affordable, but it's still really tough because, no one asked to be born with that kind of genetic condition and have to kind of basically foot the bill for that for your entire life. Is it
because it's considered a pre-existing condition? Is that kind of why it is?
This is what's interesting is things like type 1 diabetes, according to this, the model is you can get free prescriptions. And type 1 diabetes is a kind of pre-existing genetic condition. So yeah, I suppose it just kind of highlights some of the discrepancies, I suppose, of the system when you get into the nitty gritty. But yeah, I mean, having said that, the fact that even the cost of the drugs are subsidized and you don't have to pay full price, that's still pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, 11 pounds. I know that there's like conversion rate and stuff like that. That would still be amazing in America, even like with insurance that you pay for.
Right.
So,
yeah. That comes out to $14.75 US here. It looks like.
That's so good. Well, getting back to something that's a little bit lighter, let's go back to fitness for a bit. Since you do live in a different country and our view on fitness is very much based on what we see here in America, we did want to ask you as well if there are any differences in fitness culture as far as what you've observed maybe online.
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. I'll put it this way. I think I see more similarities than differences, but the differences that I do see or have seen over the years, I tend to find that I think I'm going to group the UK and Europe as one now, but I'm pro Brexit, but no pro Brexit. Wait, I'll get that right. No, I'm pro European. Yeah. I'm basically in Europe, I would say that kind of the infrastructure is kind of built around walking and moving around like this. They build sort of cycle lanes and things like that a lot more, I would say. And I think the kind of active urban development is certainly kind of a bigger thing, I would say. I think that kind of, because there's a lot of research that shows actually when they kind of tack almost like a pedometer, but they call it an accelerometer. So it measures how much people move onto people, and they compare them from the US, and then it look at the Europeans. They tend to find that Europeans tend to move more, but it's mostly because of the kind of moving around cities and how they move about more than anything else. So I suppose there's a kind of that there's a culture of sort of that side of things that I don't think we ever have to even think about. And then I suppose the only other thing I can think of is that I think in America there tends to be more of a sort of emphasis on using supplements and drugs, I would say, than I think in Europe people are necessarily comfortable with. I think it tends to be sort of more kind of let's try and do this without. Does that make any sense?
No, it
It
does. Do you
does.
think that comes down to like advertising restrictions, marketing restrictions? Because that's just a free for all over here. I don't know if it's any different over there, though.
Yeah, you know what? You hit a really good point there. So in Europe, and certainly when the UK was in Europe, we'd have to apply to these sort of regulations, but they have really strict things about what you can and can't advertise. And funnily enough, when I was on my PhD was funded by Herbalife, and I don't know if you heard of them.
Think so?
Wow.
Yeah.
That seems pretty conflict
Yes.
of interest-y.
Exactly. And the funny thing was, I mean, that was one of the reasons why I didn't like doing it, because they dictated a bit too much what was going on. And and the reason they wanted that PhD and they wanted to direct it is basically they needed a research paper to effectively, so that they could put a claim on their product to say that this will help you lose weight if you eat prebiotic fiber. And so that was what they wanted out of it. And I suppose it just gives you an insight into the differences, because I think in the States, obviously you've got the FDA and have to be certain regulations with that. But I think it's a bit more like the Wild West, I think, in the US compared to Europe. It's a lot more stringent.
And
Yeah.
the FDA too is backlogged, and we've talked a little bit before about how even like their restrictions on sunscreen are super old. So I mean, I'm sure it's the same with supplements, but that's insane that Herbalife was funding a PhD program.
Yeah. How about BMI? Because there's been a lot of focus on the body mass index over here over the years, and there's a lot of issues with it. What about over there?
Yeah, so we have BMI over here too, and it's a really tricky thing, because I think BMI is such a sort of crude tool. Really, it's when you're talking about an individual and wanting to know how you might have changed, right?
Yeah.
BMI just is terrible. It's not good really for that. It's such a crude measure. It might be quite good when you're looking at kind of you're doing a study on kind of 100,000 people, and you might not have the capacity or funding to kind of do individual kind of measurements. But really on an individual basis, it's just not that useful. I think, to be honest with you, Andrew, they're even looking at changing, moving away from BMI in the healthcare settings now. They're looking at using things like waist to hip ratio and that sort of thing, which is a bit invasive, if I'm honest, certainly compared to BMI, but it tends to correlate better with sort of health markers and that sort of thing to a certain degree. And I'll say that because there are issues even with those measurements too.
If you're seeing a move away from BMI, how do you recommend people track progress? Because I know that we three have spoken about not being big fans of the scale because it becomes really obsessive sometimes, and it might not be the best way to move forward. So
yeah, it's a really good question. And I think, I mean, the scale doesn't, obviously it just tells you sort of weight, but it doesn't tell you what that weight is sort of made up of, if you like. And I mean, I think how you measure is obviously influenced by what you want to measure. I mean, Andrew, I know you mentioned that you like to sort of flex and kiss your biceps or something. So
I don't recall the kiss part, but
but I think, right, so a tape measure might be quite good for that, right? So but then obviously, it might not be good for some if you want to, I don't know, measure something else. So I think it's there are things like, I mean, you can, and it depends, they're not always easily accessible, but you can get these things called, it's a bit of a technical name, but bioelectrical impedance. And what it does is it sends a little electrical shock through your body. You don't feel it, but you stand on this sort of plate, and you hold kind of two little handles, if you like, in your hands, and it gives you a reading, and that gives you an estimate of things like fat-free mass, bone mineral density, and fat mass and that sort of thing. So it gives you an idea of what we would say is composition and what you're sort of made up of, if you like, which is a lot more useful, I think, than just weight, because you could lose weight, and who's to say that is from muscle or bone or anything else? And I think so it's that it gives you a little bit more nuance, if you like, around these sorts of things. And sometimes gyms have these sorts of things, but I think obviously some people use pictures. and that sort of thing. I personally, depending on the goal, I quite like using performance measures. So you could, obviously you could use things like resting heart rate, but maybe can you walk further in the same amount of time? Is that it removes the focus sometimes off your own sort of body image sometimes, which I think is actually sometimes can be a bit healthier. And focuses on sort of function and things you can do, rather than, I think you get wrapped up in this kind of world of guilt feelings, sometimes quite negative feelings. And I think as we all do, and I think it tends to be kind of hopefully develop a bit of a healthier relationship.
Yeah.
Nice.
You mentioned like these sensors you can hold, but I think there's some smart scales that do this too. So maybe that defeats the purpose if you do have to still weigh yourself. But there's ones, I think mine does this, where you stand on it long enough, it sends those little shocks through your body. You don't feel it, but then it gives you that info through their app. And it's pretty cool. Interesting way to track progress. But I agree with you. Like endurance to me has been a good way to track progress with the hiking that I do. I've definitely noticed being more capable over time on the same hikes that I've done previously. And I was struggle busing for most of it, particularly with inclines.
Are there any good apps that you like to track performance that people could maybe download and start using?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I suppose my first thing would be, it depends what you want to track, because there are good apps for different things. I mean, look, I quite like the sort of Apple Health kind of an Apple Fitness side of things, but I have an iPhone and it works really well, and it kind of integrates really well with Apple Health. But I appreciate not everyone has an iPhone. I have used things like Polar, which is its kind of own app, and but it depends on you needing their kind of heart rate monitor and that sort of thing. If I'm honest with you, Pam, compared to Andrew, I'm like a Luddite. I'm not very techie. But so
good old fashioned pen and paper then.
Yeah. You should thank yourself. I got here just about on time, honestly. But but having said that, look, I will say this, because I did work in sort of public health moving into the NHS as well, and there was a lot of sort of I worked in stop smoking services as well, and a lot of people used apps for that too. And the research does seem to show that apps are good, but they are not as good as, say, an in-person coach, for example, and that applies to fitness too. But having said that, we need to make exercise and fitness and things like that as accessible as possible. So I am definitely not saying don't use them. I suppose it's just I'm probably not the best person to give you an answer on that one. But,
that's fair.
Well, I'll build on your Apple Health point, though, because one area of it that I really like is, first of all, it can bring all your third-party app data and like your watch data, your Oura Ring data into Apple Health. But then it also has a trends section, and it can show you how you're trending over time. And to your point about maybe building endurance, that can help you notice, oh, my resting heart rate is getting lower, or my daily steps are getting higher. And it can even notify you when it's noticing trends, good or bad. So I really like that to see progress over time, because I like looking at like the Apple Watch daily information, but this is like way more interesting because you're just seeing what really matters, your trends over time.
Yeah, 100%. And I think as well, just going back to the point, it really depends on what your goal is, because I know that there are apps out there, for example, that focus on developing kind of healthy relationships and maybe using things like cognitive behavioral therapy with eating. They don't necessarily get into sort of the exercise side of things. So obviously we talked about apps that monitor certain things, but then you've got other things that might help you through and achieve certain goals as well. So I think it really hinges on what you want to achieve more than anything else, I think.
Mm. So what are some of the most common or popular myths out there that you see about fitness while you're out and about?
Do you know, this is such a hard question, because I swear I go onto social media every day and I think I see about 10 new things that I think, wait, why are people doing this? And I think I'm just trying to think, like the list of myths is endless, I think, almost, but I can give you some common ones. So I think certainly things like, that weights, for example, might make someone bulky. I think in general, I mean, we all have our own sort of body types and things like that, but in general, weights per se won't necessarily make anyone bulky. And especially, I know that sometimes that concern is sort of more towards with women and things like that. And I suppose it's a shame because actually, certainly as I mean, we all age, but certainly women tend to be at a little bit more risk of things like osteoporosis and that sort of thing, which is sort of, bone loss beyond the normal. And weights is something that can really help with that. So if people do sort of avoid it for reasons of not wanting to be too bulky, it's a shame because actually it's something that will hopefully pay off in the long run and help people kind of maintain their quality of life and independence, when you're 150 or however old Dumbledore was. Right?
I actually didn't know that. I think like the common misconception is like that it's because you don't get enough calcium or you don't drink enough milk that your bone density starts going down. That's what I hear a lot because I've been lactose intolerant almost my whole life. So everyone's like, you're going to have brittle bones, girl. But it's good to know that it's like you can actually prevent that with weight training. That's really cool. Yeah.
And obviously calcium intake does, it's a kind of hand-in-hand thing. You kind of need to do a little bit of both. But really the amount of calcium that's in milk isn't actually enough to kind of maintain and drive bone improvements in bone health. So doing a bit of resistance exercise that will provide the kind of driving force to do it. And I'm sure I don't know your diet, Pam, but I'm sure even if it's just a little 500 milligram supplement of calcium, that usually is enough to sort of cover you for even if your kind of calcium in the diet is a little less. So so that's certainly one of the myths. I mean, there are loads others. One thing I have to say, ice baths, you must have seen those on
aren't those making a comeback right now? Ice baths, he said, right?
Oh, ice baths. Okay, yes.
Yeah.
No, it's funny you mentioned that because I have an aunt who's like really into cryotherapy. That's basically the same thing, right?
Pretty much. Yeah. No, I'm not going to say I hate it, but I kind of do. It's one of those things that sort of, I think it's been packaged and everyone thinks it's like a wonder thing that solves everything. And I think anytime something's like that, you kind of tend to smell us a bit off and you think, maybe it doesn't quite do that. The irony with ice baths and even with kind of cryotherapy type stuff is that basically, especially if people do it after exercise because they think it helps recovery. The thing is, with exercise, you're kind of developing a stress response and you're actually inflaming your body to a point. And then the idea is that you recover and then become a little stronger and fitter and that sort of thing. But with ice baths, you blunt the inflammation and the stress that happens to your body. So what happens is you don't actually reap the benefits from doing the exercise. Which is really funny because you see all these people doing it afterwards for quote unquote recovery, but actually they're kind of not really helping themselves.
Okay.
Is it the same with dry saunas? Because my gym has a dry sauna and everyone's in there after. So now I'm curious if that's also a load of
So when you say dry sauna, you mean the heat, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Okay. So interestingly, dry saunas are actually really they really are quite good for you. So
good.
Yeah. And so there's been kind of, I don't want to get into kind of the detail, but they basically help your body kind of adapt to the heat. And that has sort of potential kind of other effects on your health and things like blood pressure and that sort of thing. So, I mean, I've always thought, it's so uncomfortable getting into a really cold shower or I mean, I see people and they put like these tubs in their garden and they have to break the ice and then they dunk themselves in. And you think, well, hang on, it's so uncomfortable. This can't be good for you. And it turns out it's not, from a recovery point of view, it's really actually not.
Yeah.
And since we're talking about myths and you did write in after listening to our segment, is there any myth busting you need to do with regards to what the three of us had to say about how we stay active?
So I actually have absolutely no notes. I re-listened to
Oh,
it.
goodness.
Wow. Look at us, Andrew. Who would have thought?
Yeah, you guys nailed it. Honestly, you really did. I think from everything from in terms of accessibility, how to start out, I think, yeah, no
Oh,
notes.
thanks. Well, doing this over the years, you learn to tread carefully and not overstep boundaries or your knowledge base. So maybe that's what
we
was
stay
happening
humble
there.
here on Millennial.
Maybe I need to start throwing some random crap out there from time to time to get some people writing in. You're wrong, Andrew, and here's why. No, that's good to know. How about let's talk a little bit about current fad diets. We hear a lot about these. Maybe the marketing, getting back to what we were talking about earlier, is different over there. It's restricted, but over here there's a lot of wild information always flying around. What are the current fad diets, and are any of them actually good for you?
Okay, yeah. So this is another interesting question. I mean, I'm going to give a classic kind of scientist response, which is it really depends. I mean, look, fad diets can range from. I mean, I'm sure you've heard. Most people have probably heard of them. You've got kind of your low carb or no carb, all the way to sort of all carb, if you like. You've got very, very low calorie ones to sort of high calorie ones even. I mean, the composition of all these different things differ. I think even things like intermittent fasting, there's a whole range of them. And I think sometimes they can be useful, depending on which ones. There are some that are harmful. I will just say that straight out. Some diets are, I mean, to be honest with you, look, even this sort of carnivore diet where all people do is just eat meat, it might work for like a week. But the reality is, what I try and kind of focus people on is to try and develop a healthy long-term relationship with food. And I think you mentioned it last time, but it's kind of everything in moderation, if you like, to a certain degree. And I think really it does come down to that. I think fad diets can be useful for a specific goal for a certain reason. For example, there's a thing called a very low calorie diet. I mean, it is what it says on the tin. It is literally sometimes just 400 calories in a day. And sometimes in hospital settings, they use that before some people need to go in for surgery. And that's very useful. It might be used for maybe 1 to 2 weeks maximum, but that's it. The thing is, I think for most people in the general public, probably isn't necessary. And I think you can eat the foods that you like and lead a healthy life. And I think it's an important message to have. Because I do cringe when I see people on social media and, they slather themselves in honey and just say, I'm just going to eat raw lamb. And you just think, oh God, really? Okay.
This is the viral new honey diet.
Yeah.
You mentioned intermittent fasting too. It sounds like, like you were saying, it can work for some people, but not for everybody.
Yes, absolutely. And I would always kind of challenge people and think, okay, what is intermittent fasting? Because I know there have been people have kind of created protocols and sometimes they sell and market those. But I mean, look, my last meal is usually at some point around 7:30, 8 o'clock in the evening, just because I finish work and I go for a walk and I come back and that's when I cook dinner and that's how it is. There's no special reason. It's not because I'll eat after 8 o'clock or anything like that. Yeah. And then I might go to, I'll have my evening, go to sleep and then wake up. And I tend to do a little bit of exercise first thing in the morning, which I know that you I think Pam, you mentioned you did too. And then I'll basically maybe have my breakfast, maybe 8:30, 9 o'clock. I mean, I've effectively fasted. It's just, I don't really call it that. And it's just practical and it's what works for me. And I think, you could do it for longer if you wanted to, if that works for you. And I suppose, it really comes back to what your goal is. Is this sort of a healthy kind of long-term relationship? And if it is, fantastic. So I think it's kind of understanding why, and it really kind of helps to, I think, set you on the right foot when looking at these sorts of things.
Yeah. To your point, I mean, like, even sleeping overnight is a form of fasting. You're not eating as you sleep. Like, that's kind of what you're saying. Like, you have dinner later in the day and then you wake up and, it's time for breakfast at 8:30 or whatever time it is. I tend to be like an old person when it comes to dinner. I like dinner around like 5:30, 6 o'clock, which I think to some people it feels early. But then in the morning, I don't even really get hungry until late morning at best. So that's kind of how I've stumbled into it. But just to your point, yeah, it's like it's what works for you.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it that you've hit the nail on the head. I think there is a level of sort of intuition about, yeah, I mean, people say listening to your body, but I know that there's a sort of thing about, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. But look, if you don't feel hungry at that point, you don't have to. I think it is about finding a kind of your pattern, if you like. And it's important because, ideally you sort of want to have a lifelong healthy relationship with food, and not feel like you're kind of pigeonholing and having to fit a box to just because someone said so.
And then you won't be able to keep up with that because you're not happy with it. Like maybe you can make it work for a couple of weeks or a month, but then you're going to fall back to your old ways.
Exactly.
So beginning to wind things down here, what would be your best advice for somebody who's maybe starting their fitness journey from ground zero and is a little bit scared to start the process?
Yeah, it's a really, really important question, Pam. I think it's, because look, I'm from a kind of family who's very kind of fitness orientated. And so I think, it's easy for me. And I have a kind of privilege, if you like, to sort of, because I don't have to sort of think like that. But having worked with people, generally what I've found is that, I mean, Andrew, you kind of touched on it a little bit there, which is finding things that people enjoy, and starting there. I think as well, it's about finding what you feel comfortable with. I know there's a big thing about trying to kind of break your comfort zone and reach out. And I think that's important. But there are times in your life where sometimes just knowing what's within your comfort zone and what you're comfortable with is important too. And I think this is one of those, because to make that first step, it is quite daunting at times. And if you are happy in certain environments, if you're happier sort of doing it at home, that's great. And I think obviously there are lots of sort of apps and there's things that people you can kind of hopefully rely on, and coaches and personal trainers who might be able to give some good advice if you're not sure. And I think that's always a good starting point. But I think don't underestimate the sort of power of just taking a first step out. And if you're able to walk, to just take a step. And I think it sounds really sort of cliche and almost sort of simple, but I think in order to kind of take the next step and get to that kind of mountain, you have to sort of start with that first step. And I think it has to be somewhat comfortable for you. Because otherwise I think you need to develop that confidence to then sort of stretch yourself later on in life.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. I mean, taking the first step can be the hardest part because it's intimidating. It's like, oh my God, what a long journey. But you just take one little step at a time. And before you know it, you're noticing the changes in your body or your endurance or whatever else. Do you have like any green or red flags for seeking a personal trainer? Like any tips there for somebody who might be looking for one?
A personal trainer is almost like a kind of a relationship or a friendship. And I think you almost have to approach it like that. I mean, you're not going to get on with everyone, so that's fine. I think there's an element of it. Sometimes you have to sort of, a bit like therapists, you sometimes have to kind of shop around a little bit. But I think red flags for me is always when someone says this is the only way. I think
got it.
It's sometimes as well, it's worth looking at qualifications, just as a bit of a kind of entry point, if you like. But it doesn't always mean that someone can be very well qualified and they just don't have the kind of personal skills to sort of help guide you and be the kind of person that you need to be. It's kind of approaching it and almost, it's not like dating, but it's kind of just trying to kind of get a sense of, okay, does this person understand me? Are they taking into account my needs and wants and goals? And are they putting those first? Because I mean, basically, well, that's what you're paying for.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good comparison because it's somebody you want to have a little fun with too. When you're working out, it's probably before, after work. So you want to kind of like relieve some stress. I totally get what you're saying. And I like the therapist suggestion or comparison too. And then you were also talking about like I love that red flag point too about this is the only way, because if they're not willing to like steer you in different directions, try different things with you, you're not going to enjoy that. And yeah, they might not be as knowledgeable. If they only have one way of doing things, they should be flexible too.
I mean, we'll just add as well in terms of the qualifications. I think in America, there's a kind of association called the NASM, which is the kind of National Association for Sports Medicine. Basically, we have a slightly different body in the UK, but usually if someone's qualified with this association, they're kind of certainly legit, because you do get some people who, and it can be a bit like the Wild West, where they say, I'm a personal trainer, and you think, hang on a second, let's look at the qualifications, and it turns out they really, I don't know, it's kind of a back of the envelope type qualification, and it's not as comprehensive as it needs to be. So I think,
especially online with social media now, right? There's so many people that advertise themselves as personal trainers and offer, like online personal training and stuff like that. So it could be hard to weed out.
Yeah, 100%.
People.
I think, you know what, Pam, you're absolutely right, because I think what people see on social media is, are you in shape? And basically that somehow is a qualification. And I hate to break it to people, but look, having abs is not a qualification, or being able to wear a pair of leggings is not a qualification. The thing is, it's slightly frustrating, and I think that is, when I speak to other personal trainers, we pull our hair out, thinking, how do we compete with this? But I think, look, people who want help will seek out, hopefully, the right help.
Excellent points. Thanks for all of that information, Jeremy. We really appreciate it. And I also wanted to ask you, since you are a listener of the show, do you have any questions for us?
Oh my gosh. This is a twist. Okay. Oh gosh. Wait, how rude can they be?
Oh, please, go for it. Uh-oh.
Wait, can we play, is it Fuck, Marry, Kill?
Sure.
Okay. Let's go with Trump, JD Vance, and Elon Musk.
Is that for both of us?
Yeah.
You gotta kill Trump, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, because if you kill Trump, then JD Vance becomes president. So what's the lesser of the two evils? But Trump's already in office and it's not going well. So
okay, I got it. I'm gonna fuck JD Vance, kill Trump, marry Elon, and then I divorce Elon and get all of his money. Hopefully there's no prenup. He'll rush into it and he won't think it through.
I think Andrew's thought of this before.
I think Andrew's right, because you got to get that money.
Plus JD Vance has the guy liner. He's got a little style.
And I also I don't want to be beholden to some crazy fake Catholic crap. So yeah, we're not going to marry into that.
Were those the right answers, Jeremy? Do you approve of these?
I mean, is there a right answer? I don't know.
No, we're
it's
all
the lesser
losers.
Of all evils.
Cool. Well, Jeremy, anything you want to plug before we wrap this up, or any final thoughts?
Honestly, no. I mean, listen, I work for the NHS. That's my main job. I just hope that this has helped some people, and I think I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I'm not doing it for money. I think it's just this is kind of for societal good. So yeah.
Aw, thank you, Jeremy, so much for all of your contributions today, and we really appreciate it.
And thanks for listening.
Oh,
yeah, thanks for listening too.
Keep going, please. Keep going.
Will do. All right, it was really great having Jeremy on, and he was so nice. We had a blast talking to him. As we get to the end of the show here, listeners, remember, you can email millennialshow@gmail.com or use the contact form on millennialshow.com to contact us. You can also leave a comment on Spotify or YouTube or DM us on social. That's actually how Jeremy reached out to us. He DM'd us on Instagram. And if you enjoy this indie podcast, we would appreciate a review in your favorite podcast app. Time for some recommendations.
I wanted to recommend the TV series Étoile from Amazon Prime. This is the new series from Daniel and Amy Sherman Palladino, who are the masterminds behind Gilmore Girls and also The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. So if you enjoyed either of those two properties, you might want to check this one out. This one centers around two world-renowned ballet companies, one in New York and one in Paris. And they've noticed that the basically like the popularity of ballet is dwindling and they're having a hard time filling their auditoriums. And so in a last ditch effort to revive the ballet community, they decide to swap their most talented stars. So it takes place in New York and also in LA. And it's kind of like a fish out of water story for both sides. So if you enjoy like the quippy dialogue of either Gilmore Girls or Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, I would definitely recommend checking this out. And you'll also see some familiar faces as well. The Palladinos are notorious for kind of casting people from previous projects in their new projects. So that's always really fun as well.
I would like to recommend Grace and Stella Under Eye Masks. I get them on Amazon. Maybe I need to stock up now to help reduce dark circles and puffiness under the eyes. I know people have different ways of doing this, but I bought these about a month or two ago initially, and I have noticed a difference after taking them off, and they're very refreshing. So I think it's a great rec as the warmer months approach. You just keep them on for 15, 20 minutes, and you feel and look refreshed, in my opinion.
Ooh, I'm going to look into these.
Yeah, same.
I usually
They're pretty. They're gold.
Ooh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I actually like to put the like under eye mask on while I'm doing my makeup, and I just keep them on while I'm doing my eyeshadow. So,
okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's smart because they'll catch the fallout too.
Yeah, they catch the fallout, and then you get like the benefits of whatever else they're doing.
Oh, that's so smart. Life pro tip over here.
Mm-hmm.
I want to recommend Liquid IV. I'm sure everyone's heard this advertised on a podcast at some point in the last couple of years. But I recently tried the powdered formula. I think you can or used to be able to get like the actual drinks at the store, but you can also buy the powder and just mix it at home. And I'm finding that especially as it's starting to get warmer and I'm having a lot of really horrific allergies right now because of all the pollen in the air. I am needing to be extra hydrated right now. And this stuff is a really nice boost, especially if I do it first thing in the morning and drink it before my coffee. Makes me feel so like energized and awake. So definitely check it out if you haven't.
Do you have a favorite flavor?
Right now I'm doing the blackberry peach. And it's pretty good, but so far I think I like the strawberry best.
I like the golden cherry.
Okay, I haven't tried that one.
And the sugar-free lemon in case anybody needs a sugar-free option.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. After Dark starts in a moment for patrons and Apple Podcast subscribers. I'm Andrew.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Pamela.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.